What's up? It's Ethan with Rewind Sports, and today we're going to be doing the Ethan Alexander show. I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be having the microphone sitting up in its stand for once instead of me holding it in my hand and all laid back on the couch. I'm going to be leaning forward a little bit, and actually I will lower the camera down a little bit so you can see me. And I should have worn a hat because my hair looks horrible, but I'm not all that worried about it. We're talking about the Super Bowl today, as well as some NBA trade deadline stuff, because I didn't make any content around the NBA trade deadline, and I figured I should, especially because I'm an NBA guy, and for me not to do that is a little bit disgraceful. Um, I want to get started with the Super Bowl. I know it's probably the bigger topic, but it is the topic of more recent memory because it literally just happened. I'm currently recording this show at 11:42 p.m. Central Time, so the game ended about 2 hours ago, and I just wanted to give all my thoughts on it, all my thoughts on the game, on the show, on the halftime show, on everything. So I would put it I would put it this way: the game was not great, but it wasn't bad, and it was tight. It was competitive. I liked it. Everything about it was fine. Nothing about it said. I mean, this wasn't a middling game. This game was pretty good. Here, wait, real quick. Turning down my mic a little bit. Maybe that'll be better. I'm turning up a little bit. I don't test these things before I start recording. I just start recording. Um, no, the game was good, and the halftime show was good. But I do want to talk about the halftime show and some takes regarding it, some bad hot takes. Um, the game, the first half was nothing to write home about. The second half really wasn't either, but there's some notable stuff. Joe Burrow had a tough night. So did Matt Stafford, but Joe Burrow did not because of his own incompetency or anything like that. It wasn't his fault. The Bengals O line is just really bad, and it really showed tonight. I think I personally could play on the Bengals O line. Bengals scouts, Cincinnati scouts. If you want to hit me up, I'm 6'2", 180 pounds of no muscle, and I've never played football before. But I think I fare just as well as anyone else on that Bengals O line. It really is that bad. Joe Ingles. We'll talk about that. We will talk about Joe Ingles. Joe Burrow really did get screwed all night. It was a tough night for Joe. Matt Stafford also had not a great night. I think he had two interceptions. Not great. And I'll be honest, if the Bengals ended up winning this game, it would have looked really bad for Matt Stafford because the defense played really good for the Rams. Cooper Kupp played really good, and if they had lost, Matt Stafford would have looked rough. But they didn't. The Bengals lost, and the Rams won. And I think that's the safest outcome. I think if the Bengals win, a lot more stuff happens. I was rooting for the. Oh, something popped up. Sorry. I was rooting for the Bengals personally because I like Joe Burrow and I like Jamar Chase and I like the guys on the Bengals. But I think this was the safer bet on the Rams. If you were a betting man, which I am not, I'd probably put money on the Rams. However, however, we have to talk about this guy, Joe Burrow, and what his trajectory in the league may be in coming years. I don't know. It's tough, but I do think that he is a top AFC quarterback. He's a top league quarterback. He's not S tier. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. But I think he's up there in the A tier. I think he's in the same tier as Matthew Stafford, who's a great, fantastic quarterback. Um, probably if Tom Brady was still in the league next year, he'd be in that category as well. Top of the line quarterbacks, not guys who are going to single handedly will you to a Super Bowl, but top tier. Um, I think he only gets better from here. I mean, he is a second year guy, and he has a very young cast of characters around him. And I think if the Bengals front office can manage to get him just a decent O line, then they can be a real issue. Fantastic kicker, fantastic defense in these playoffs, despite the fact that their defense was not great in the regular season. They had a good defensive run in the playoffs. And all in all, I was impressed by the Bengals and Joe Burrow the whole playoff run. I doubted them. I had them winning the first game against the Raiders, and I had them beating the Titans, but I didn't see them touching either the Chiefs or the Bills. And the Chiefs, of course, beat the Bills. I thought the Chiefs were going to smoke the Bengals. They, of course, did not. The Bengals had a great game, a great comeback win. And I'll be honest, for a while during this game, I thought the Bengals had it in lock. They kind of slowed down at the end. Again, that O line really screwed Joe over. But at the end of the day, I do think this was the safer outcome. I think if the Bengals win, people start talking about Joe Burrow like he's the best quarterback in the league. Talking about the Bengals like they were way underrated, and that the O line wasn't that bad, or something. Some crazy stuff like the O line being bad didn't matter. It did matter. Even if they had won this game, it would have looked rough. I mean, obviously the Tennessee game and this game really, really showed on the O line. If I'm the Bengals front office, those guys are all getting looked at as replaceable pieces if they want to run it back, because they still do have to go through Josh Allen next year. They still have to go through Patrick Mahomes next year, and they have to go through Derrick Henry, who should be healthy next year. You're going to need a better O-line so that you can score as many points as those teams are going to score, because they are going to score their points. Do I think the Bengals make it back to the Super Bowl anytime soon? You really don't know. I think they might. I think if I were to bet on it, I'd say they would be my third option to make it after the Bills and the Chiefs. And then I'd go Bengals, then Titans. But at the end of the day, I could see the Titans and the Bengals switching that. All in all, the Bengals may be a one spurt season, a one hit wonder run, but who knows? They may make it back. This game in particular, again, was okay. Halftime show, and then I'll talk about the second half. Halftime show was great. Of course, when you get that group of characters together, fantastic musicians, you're gonna have a great halftime show. Dr. Dre was great. Snoop Dogg was great, even in the limited role that they did give him. Kendrick Lamar was good. Eminem was great, again in the limited role. 50 Cent was good. Mary J. Blige was and that's tough because I like Mary J. Blige. She was Um, and I just think there's some critiques here, and if I hadn't have seen some takes on Twitter, I wouldn't even really be talking about this because this is a sports show. But I do love music. People on Twitter were saying this was the best Super Bowl they've ever seen, and I know every single year you're going to have people that say that because they're caught up in the moment. People are easy to impress in a short-term memory. They don't realize how good they once had it. This Super Bowl halftime show was really good, but it doesn't even come close to some of the ones in the past. Ones that come into my mind personally, first and foremost is Prince. I think that it was the best halftime show ever. The feel, the power, the legendary status, everything that happened in that halftime show surpassed this one greatly. Um, Michael Michael Jackson. Of course, I wasn't alive to see that one, but I have watched it. Was better than this. Um, you could argue U2. You could argue. You could argue, even though I usually wouldn't, Bruce Springsteen. I'm not a huge Bruce Springsteen guy. But it was a top tier one, and seeing these guys back together, these older guys, was a breath of refreshing air. It was not the best Super Bowl halftime show ever. Stop saying that. It just wasn't. It is at the very least, at the very most third, at the very most, and I think that's a stretch. And there's probably some I'm forgetting, because I'm not a Super Bowl halftime show connoisseur. But I think the Prince halftime show is not only the best Super Bowl halftime show of all time, it's one of the best live performances of all time, probably right up there with like Queen Live Aid. Um, I think the way you make a show like that better is you take some of the pieces away. When you have five people singing, you just don't have enough time to disperse that through everybody. Of course, 50 Cent doesn't even get a full song. Kendrick Lamar gets one song. Eminem gets one song. Mary J. Blige gets one song. And then, of course, Dre and Snoop Dogg get a couple because they're the headliners. I think I think if you limit that to Eminem, Dre, and Snoop, they kind of fit more together than the other three. Then you give them each a little bit more time to do their own thing and work together because those three are the most worked together artists on the stage. I think the show would be better. Nothing against the other people other than Mary J. Blige, who I thought was pretty weak in this performance. Um, 50 Cent didn't even get his whole song. He did get the upside down part, which was pretty cool. Let's get back to football. Just remember that that wasn't the best halftime show of all time. The second half was when things really got tight. Despite the fact that it was kind of the same as the first half, but with more sacks. Um, when you really look at it, this Super Bowl didn't even really feel like a Super Bowl. It was competitive, but it wasn't crazy exciting, if you know what I mean. The second half kind of proved that, where even in the moments when it should have been crazy exciting, like Joe Burrow getting sacked in the closing seconds to win Matthew Stafford and Aaron Donald and Odell their Super Bowl ring, it just wasn't that exciting. It was a good game, but at the same time, it wasn't a great game. I think a big part of that is that it was in LA. It was bright daylight. I think the being under the lights and being dark outside helps a lot, not only with the game, but also with the Super Bowl halftime show. I think the halftime show having being darker instead of during the day would have been much better. Um, it was a good game. Don't get me wrong. It just wasn't the most thrilling or exciting game. And at the end of the day, I think it'll go down as one of the more forgettable Super Bowls in recent memory. Other than the halftime show, which of course was great and will be remembered, but the game itself it was a rough one. It wasn't a bad game. Again, it was just a not very exciting game, a pretty forgettable game, a game with storylines, but not crazy storylines, you know? So at the end of the day, it was a good game. I was happy with it. I enjoyed watching it. I wasn't bored. I didn't ever doze off, but it wasn't the greatest. I think that's all the Super Bowl talk I want to have. Congratulations to the Rams. Matthew Stafford, you deserve it. Aaron Donald, you deserve it. Please do not retire. Someone told me that he was thinking about retiring, or they said it on the broadcast. There's why? Just don't retire. A dude is gonna be great. Duke could be great for years, and I don't know. I just think it's ridiculous if he retires. Matthew Stafford, great job. Cooper Kupp was the Super Bowl MVP. He had a great game. People would argue Aaron Donald, but I think Cooper Kupp has just as much of a right to that as Aaron Donald does in the offensive player. If they're equal, the offensive player will always win it. Um, and Odell, who got his ring but got hurt and didn't really play. I want to talk about the NBA trade deadline and the trades that went on in the NBA. Stuff that I'm a little bit more familiar with. I'm more comfortable talking about the NBA than I am the NFL and the Super Bowl, even though I am a NFL watcher and a Super Bowl watcher. I'm not an NFL studier. I do not indulge in the deep statistic categories of the NFL like I do the NBA. And I don't love the sport of football as much as I love the sport of basketball. So I get super excited every year come NBA trade deadline because this is the time of year just the most fun. Other than the playoffs and maybe even other than like the final two rounds of the playoffs, because trade deadline is a little bit more fun. It might be a hot take than like the first two rounds of the playoffs. Maybe that's because I'm used to the Jazz losing in the first two rounds of the playoffs. Who knows? Um, some big trades. C.J. McCollum is sent to New Orleans. I don't know why I blanked out there. Which and they send off Nikhil. It's confusing because there's a little bit of trading here and there. They send off Nikhil Alexander Walker and Juancho Hernan Gomez, I want to say. And then the Jazz get those players. No, no, no. And Josh Hart. And then the Jazz get Juancho and Alexander Walker and send off Joe Ingles and Elijah Hughes, which was incredibly sad for me because Joe Ingles is my second favorite player in the league and my favorite player on the Jazz. It was a really rough day for me, and I was incredibly saddened by that experience. I really didn't want to see Joe Ingles go, and I'm hoping he signs back, even if he wants to retire, dude. Just come back to the Jazz and retire with us. I know for no one else around the league, you're not that big of a deal to them, but you're a big deal to us. And Joe Ingles being gone is a very saddening moment for me. Um, Other big trades, I'm gonna get to the big ones. Domantas Sabonis is sent to the Kings in exchange for Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, and I don't know about that trade, dude. In the short moment, it'll make the Kings better because Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox are gonna fit better together than Halliburton and Fox were. And don't get me wrong, Sabonis is a great player. In fact, he's one of my favorite players. But he's a little older, not old, but older than Halliburton. And the Kings are going into a win now, but they're not winning now with that group. I mean, they're going to be better, but not by enough to win now. They might sneak into the playoffs. Now, if they did knock the Lakers out of the playoffs, I would be very happy, very excited. That would make my year. Seeing the lowly Lakers that were once heralded as the great new super team of the NBA, Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, LeBron James joining up to get knocked out of the playoffs by the Kings of De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. How could that happen? That'd be really funny. But no, I think the Kings made a big mistake giving away Halliburton, and I think if they were planning on giving away one of the other, Halliburton or De'Aaron Fox, you have to give away De'Aaron Fox. Halliburton's been better, and you're going to get about the same value from either one because we have seen a point where De'Aaron Fox was a borderline all-star guy last year, not so much this year. I think you keep Halliburton, you trade away Fox. Now, if you want to make that same trade for Fox instead of Halliburton, maybe that looks a little better on paper. Um, at the end of the day, I don't think you make the trade either way. And if you want to trade one, you trade Fox, not Halliburton. The Pacers are doing great. They're in their rebuilding process, and that is a fantastic start to get a guy like Tyrese Halliburton for, of course, a guy like Domantas Sabonis, who you weren't 100% sure you wanted to trade. To get a guy like Tyrese Halliburton is an incredible, impeccable move from the Pacers, and to put him under a coach like I, an actual coach, like an actual basketball coach, is pretty dangerous. It's pretty scary for the rest of the league if he continues to develop in a. He's the type of guy who doesn't matter if he's in a small market, he's going to love his area, fall in love with it, and now he has a great coach. Now he has a pretty good system around him. Whereas you don't have that with the Kings. They're a notoriously bad front office and system. If I'm looking at the Pacers, I'm looking at a team with a ton of upside now. I'm making sure I don't miss any big trades before I talk about one. We go through the league, and I didn't write any of these down. And I know it's been a couple days, so I should have written them down, but I didn't. I'm doing this at midnight, so it wasn't a huge prerogative of mine to write down a ton of stuff. My 2 points were Super Bowl and trade deadline, NBA trade deadline. Oh, and the All Star draft, which I will talk a little bit about. But that's on the same bullet point, so I still only have two. Okay, I'll just talk about it. Ben Simmons and James Harden trade. I sort of saw it coming, then I didn't see it coming, then I saw it coming. They were talking about a Ben Simmons for James Harden trade, which of course you would assume you would get more than just Ben Simmons from the Sixers for James Harden. But at one point, it was reported that the Brooklyn Nets weren't looking to make that deal anymore. Steve Nash came out and said that James Harden would not be traded if he had anything to say about it. I guess he didn't have anything to say about it because a day later he was traded for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and who was the other person? Oh, Andre Drummond. But there was one other person, and I'm totally drawing a blank on who that is. Man. But anyway, the Nets send over James Harden, and I believe Paul Millsap too, which of course doesn't mean a lot, but James Harden is a big deal. Um, yeah, this trade's gonna do a lot. I think this makes both teams better. I think you have a guy like Ben Simmons who finally can get what he wants, stop being a little baby, and play for a team that kind of fits him better. He can play a Draymond Green style role. He can have other guys around him that can control the ball. He doesn't always have the ball in his hands, and when he does have the ball in his hands, he can make plays. He still has fantastic All NBA Defensive Player of the Year caliber defense, and I think he just goes a long way to helping a Brooklyn Nets team that played a total of 16 games with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant together. They went 13-3. but they just can't stay on the floor together. Of course, you have Irving, who can only play at away games, certain away games at that. Kevin Durant, who's injury prone, James Harden, who's fat prone, and you put those three guys together, and you just don't have a super dynamic offense. You're likely to have at least two of those three guys on the floor every night now that Ben Simmons is playing, because he is a guy who will be out there. And especially now that he's trying to prove himself in a new system, I don't see Ben Simmons coming off the floor a lot. I think the value he brings to this team is probably more in the present moment than James Harden was bringing, despite the fact that James Harden is the better player. I think the value that Ben Simmons brings to this team, the fit, the defense, is a huge thing for the Brooklyn Nets. The on the other hand, you have the Philadelphia 76ers situation where you have Joel Embiid, who's having an MVP season right now. He's not my personal MVP, but he's definitely top 3. And James Harden now, who is just as good of a playmaker as Ben Simmons, if not better at times, who's a way better scorer. And you're not losing any of that defensive edge because you have a guy like Joel Embiid who's a fantastic defender. And you have a guy like Matisse Thybulle, who's a fantastic defender, and you still have a guy like Tobias Harris, who is a fantastic, what you would say, a third or fourth option, kind of squeezed in there. It really, I do think, makes both teams better, especially if James Harden can stay healthy, especially if Joel Embiid can stay healthy. I could see either of these teams going to the finals. The East is looking really good. The only thing I would say from the 76ers point of view that was rough was giving away Seth Curry. It was probably something they had to do, but at the end of the day, I think the team that got Seth Curry, that may actually give them the edge. He's a fantastic, fantastic role player. And who knows, Doc Rivers may replace Steve Nash as the head coach for the Brooklyn Nets now, because he wants to be near Seth Curry so he can see his grandchildren. I think the All-Star draft is the last thing I want to talk about. The All-Star draft, I didn't watch it live. Sucked as far as I could see. The hate for Utah Jazz players for the second straight year, not as bad as last year, I will say, but the hate on Utah Jazz players for the second straight year is just so sickening, dude. It's disgusting. Earlier in the month, earlier a couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks ago, Draymond Green got on ESPN and made fun of Rudy Gobert for crying because he didn't make the All-Star game 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Shut up, dude. I mean, this is all these guys. This is one of those things you guys fight for, to become all-stars, to build your legacy, to get your jersey retired. If dude shows a little emotion because he doesn't make an all-star game that he feels he deserved and probably did deserve, he was the defensive player of the year that year. Well, so what? To be bringing that up 3 years later is just lame. It's just lame. And then in the draft, they don't go back-to-back last, but Rudy Gobert is the second to last pick in the draft, despite the fact that he's a 3-time defensive player of the year. And I know it's not a ton of fun to be the defensive guy in an all-star game, but he's an elite role threat. He's an elite. He's elite at everything he does, to the point where he's so impactful. The only thing he's not elite at is scoring the ball in huge numbers, but he still will give you 20. And just a couple years ago, I think he put up 20 something, mid-20s, and of course his defensive impact, blah, 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 in the All-Star game. And now that the All-Star game really matters and people are actually trying to win it, why would you not want a guy like Rudy Gobert on your team? He's going to help you win a All-Star game if you're actually trying to win. If you go back to years of old when the All-Star game was a who could dunk more and a fun thing, then okay, I get it. But in today's age, the last couple of years when winning the All-Star game has actually looked like it mattered and people are actually trying out there, Rudy Gobert's a guy I would consider picking early, not the second to last pick. And the only reason he wasn't the last pick is because of politics, and they didn't want to pick James Harden. Again, petty stuff. Just pick the best players. And Donovan Mitchell went after several guys that he shouldn't have gone after. I think the one that stood out to me the most was Darius Garland, who I really do like. Darius Garland is actually one of my favorite young players in the league. I have a ton of Darius Garland cards. I invested in the guy. He is one of my favorite young players. Picking him before Donovan Mitchell is blasphemous. It's just blasphemous. He doesn't even sniff Donovan Mitchell. It, and you can't make the same argument with Mitchell like you do with Gobert. Mitchell is a great dunker. Mitchell is a electric scorer. Mitchell is a sizable, a decent defender. Mitchell is an all-around energy guy who's fun to watch, who's fun to play with. There isn't that same argument that you can make with Gobert with Donovan Mitchell. And it just year after year, it just looks like people are hating on the Jazz for what? For what? Hating on a guy like Mitchell, an incredibly likable dude. Hating on a guy like Gobert, who I know people hate, but if you look at some of the stuff he does, is also incredibly likable. Incredibly likable. He donates. He's one of the biggest donators to charity in the entire NBA, and he does a ton of work for charitable organizations. What's the hate for these guys? I just don't get it. And I know I'm a Jazz fan. I know I'm biased. But I think if this was happening to other guys, I would notice it. And I know people have to get picked last and later than others. But you're telling me that DeJounte Murray and Darius Garland or Fred VanVleet shouldn't have been the last picks? You're smoking crack if you don't think that. I'm sorry. They're just not as good as the other guys. For your last two picks, I know James Harden was a politics thing, but last year was politics with the Jazz guys and we got mad, so I think we have to be honest with ourselves and be like, why are we playing politics in the freaking All-Star draft? Just pick the best players, dude. Stop playing politics in the All-Star draft. You're grown men. LeBron, you're like 38. Durant, you're like 34, 33. Like, stop playing politics. It's lame. It's an All-Star game. Try to win. Pick DeJounte Murray over James Harden. You're stupid. Try to win the game, maybe. I don't know. It's just stupid. I don't think we should play politics in an all-star draft. Pick the guys who are going to help you win the most. Sorry. I think that's all I have to talk about today. If I forgot anything, I'm sorry. And I will try to post more on YouTube. I don't know if I have a ton of time. If you watched the last episode, you know that I got a job doing a ton of social media stuff, a ton of content stuff for the local baseball team here, the Hoptown Hoppers. So if you want to go follow the Hoptown Hoppers on anything, feel free to see some stuff I'm working on. Or follow 3Wind also on every single social media. And when I say every single, I mean every single. And the TikTok is doing really good right now. So go follow the TikTok, 3Wind Sports. 3Wind Sports on every single social media. You know where to follow. If you really like this video, and even if you didn't, go ahead and click like and subscribe. I'm so happy to be here with you on Valentine's Day. Mwah.